Ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you very much for your attention, and now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the
Welcome to our top travel destinations. I am your host, Kevin Flanagan. I have been editor of the weekly travel news column in the Sunday Independent and the Fine Wine and Food Guide, and I am here to use my decades of experience to help you know exactly where to stay, eat, drink, shop, and explore when visiting the world's top travel destinations. So sit back and enjoy the wonders of travel as we take off on our magical journey together. Welcome to Kevin's Top Travel Destinations. Have you ever had a friend who's badgered you to do something against your will? You should take up this sport, you should go and see this movie, you should follow this Netflix series, or you should go to this destination. Well, I had such a friend, Alan, my dear Dublin friend who is a hairdresser in Red Salon, and he kept on going on about this place called Gozo. So I blew him off, I'd say, for a couple of years. Finally, he had me so wound up that I booked a flight with Maltese Airways, I think it was. This is going way back into the early noughties, 2002, 2003 maybe. Myself and young Ciaran went down to Gozo. Now, you had to fly into Malta. When you got to Malta, you have a taxi ride for about an hour. And I remember we were meeting Alan on the island of Gozo. So the taxi drive takes you down to the harbour on Malta, and there you get on a ferry. And Alan had told me to get a Czech beer and get Ciaran whatever he had. I think he may have been drinking at that time. So we both stood on the bow and had our Czech local beer. And a miracle happened. Dear listener, a miracle happened. As we cut through the water, going past the extraordinarily beautiful islands on our right, all anxiety of Western capitalist life disappeared as if by a magic wand. I will never forget it. That 25-minute trip from Malta to this small little island of 30,000 inhabitants and no traffic lights was where the magic started. And I have to tell you, the magic never let up. We arrived to see my friend Alan dressed like some retired rock star from Aerosmith. He was tanned, he had a beard, he had a napkin wrapped around his head. He looked cool. And he whisked us up to a place where he was staying, which was a place called Ciaran. All the pronunciations, you'll have to forgive me. Off we went, settled into his apartment that he'd rented, and then we went exploring. Well, the first night, he said, we're going down to Ciaran, which is where the ferry boats arrive in, and we had a meal. It was myself and Alan, Ian, Alan's son, and Ciaran. And the purpose of the trip was we were going to learn scuba diving. But a lot more happened, believe me. The first night encapsulated the further magic. We'd had the magic of the ferry ride. And I can remember sitting in a restaurant, outdoors, temperature 25 degrees, overlooking the harbour. And suddenly, as we were tucking into our beautiful lobster and seafood, and it was absolutely delicious with some local wine, and Alan knew he'd become native, he'd gone native. I knew straight away that this was special. But around 11 o'clock, the magic happened again. Boom! Fireworks exploded above our heads. It was an extraordinary display on such a small little... I remember Gozo has a very small inhabitants, as they say, 30,000 max. And there is nobody there apart from pretty much locals back in 2002. But each of the little towns has a very proud reputation. They have their own festa, they have their own patron saints, and my goodness me, they have a firework display. A firework display that's one of the best in the world. They have a tradition of making fireworks, and in fact, they have some fatalities because they store their fireworks. It's a hot island, and sometimes, boom, they go off prematurely. This night they didn't. And Alan took us, and we drove up to the little village at the top of the hill, and there was every sort of gathering of people. It was after midnight, but the whole village was there. Grandparents, parents, children, babies in buggy, men in T-shirts, men in vests. It was an absolute sweat house of activity. And then, of course, you got the local marching bands who couldn't play music, but marched purposefully up and down and making sounds which sort of resembled a song you could maybe just about imagine if you half closed your ears and squinted. And then, of course, came the Virgin Mary on the plinth, being carried by some stalwart men. I can remember looking at Ian and Ciaran, and they were in love with the place. And the next day, we went into the capital, which is Victoria. Now, you, dear listener, can repeat all of this because the island has changed a little over the 20 years since I've been going there, but not that much. The essential character is still there. There has been a change, possibly because of Brexit, in the amount of Brits that used to go there, because the island was a UK principality. It was the only island, Malta, that got the Victoria Cross for its service during the Second World War against the Nazi Axis. And it was an incredible piece of valour by the people and the armies on Malta to fight off the Nazis, which they successfully did. And of course, the Brits were welcome, and then Brexit has made things a little bit more difficult. Well, alack and alas, they've been replaced by Italians and French and Netherlands and Oslo, and all of the Northern Europeans are now flocking there for a lovely bit of R&R and sunshine. So, we went around Victoria, which is the centre, the capital of Gozo. Now, there's a couple of things about Gozo you'll have to know. It's really very, very easy to get along with. You hire a car there for very little money. You drive on the right-hand side, so if you're coming from either the UK or Ireland, suddenly driving on the other side of the road. The place is coming down with churches. Everyone speaks English, and all the signs are in English. So it's very easy transition to go to a Mediterranean island which has such a unique... It's really like, if you've ever been to Connemara, which is in the west coast of Ireland, quite a bleak place, but has a wonderful bleak beauty. I think Gozo's a bit like that, Dingle or Connemara, but with sunshine. Now, of course, with global warming, it's getting a little sticky in the summer, but if you go in the shoulder months, just before the peak season of July, August, and just after September, October, even November, you're going to get beautiful weather. And there is something about the island that is terribly and beautifully commodious. Well, we then had a tour. Victoria has cafes. It has the incredible fortress at the top, which is definitely worth a trip around. Get a guided tour of that. You will enjoy it. Great restaurants. You can do your fish and chips all the way through to the local Gotzian meal, which is rabbit and these particular cheeses and cured meats. Delicious. Once we'd looked around Victoria, we then decided to start our journey into the water, which we were there for to learn the basic PADI course in diving. So we went out to Gilendi, which is, again, dotted. All these main island towns are dotted around the coastline, and 2 or 3 of them are, like Jara, are dotted in the middle on hills where they catch the breeze. And here we camped for a week to learn how to scuba dive. They had their own tank, I remember, that we could go into. And myself and Alan and our 2 young sons, well, we had, I have to say, an absolute ball. If you want to learn scuba diving, or if you don't, this is the place to go. And then they slowly introduce you all the safety, because diving is an extreme sport. You could easily kill yourself at 30 degrees, 30 meters down. So we learn how to take off our masks and take out our respirator and take off our tank and put it back on, all underwater, all under safe conditions. I remember one of the first occasions we went into an actual cave underwater. It really gives me goosebumps to think of the absolute wonder of these very different coastal areas around Gozo. And if you're a diver, you have the fantastic wreck, Popeye's wreck, where they made the movie with Robert Williams of Popeye. The village still exists, and they sunk the ferry of course having stripped it of all its environmentally polluting elements like the engine. And now you can dive at about 25 meters and you can go in through the ferry. You can see the big eels, which are quite dangerous. You can see this incredible underwater marine life will take the eyes out of your head. So that was a fantastic experience for me, Ian, Alan and Ciaran, and we loved that. But if you were looking for more things to do, well, I'd recommend going to Gozo because of the actual natural wonder. It has the old temples, some of the oldest temples known to man. And you can go and visit these. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's absolutely fantastic. You can look at these Neolithic temples and get a real glimpse of many hundreds and thousands of years before Christ. You really get this flavour of ancient history. And of course, the Romans came and the Byzantines came, and pretty much everybody came because it was a very strategic island. That's why later on the Nazis came. A few standout moments. Well, we went down to the Azure window, as it then was. This is an absolutely fantastic. If you saw the Game of Thrones, the Dothraki wedding in the first series, you'll have seen this incredible arch. Sadly, that arch fell in 2017 and it is no longer there. But I can remember diving under and going to the window there, and there's funnels and there's all sorts of brilliant snorkeling, underwater life. And if you can scuba dive, you're in for an absolute treat. There's caves, there's underwater lakes, and the Azure window was really fantastic. I can remember one occasion when I was swimming underneath it, snorkeling underneath it, and there was an explosion to my left about 5 meters away. Somebody had dropped 35 meters off the top of the arch and landed, very nearly killing me. But there you go. I survived. The other place I would recommend you go to if you'd like just some sand and sun is the Ramallah beach. It's a beautiful sandy beach that has more recently been prone to jellyfish, but they're seasonal. It's an environmental problem in the Med, as you probably know. The Ramallah Beach is fantastic. It's a very safe area. If you're going with your family, it's a fabulous beach. It has two really good restaurants. One's a sort of a fast food restaurant, and then there's this fantastic family run where you can get your seafood, you can get your lobster, you can get your fresh red snapper fish, you can have a lovely glass of Gozo or Maltese wine, which is superb, by the way. And if you really want to upgrade your experience of eating, they have such a range of different restaurants. The best one is probably Tar French, which is a Michelin star place, which we went to on a special occasion. Incredible service. This is 3-star Michelin service. Fantastic food. But you know what I love about Gozo? There's the informality. Even in a posh restaurant like that, it's informal. They all speak English and they welcome you in a way that I think is quite unique. I haven't quite found it. It really does take that. If you're English speaking, it is such an easy place to holiday and spend time in. There are so many different places to visit, but what I would suggest you do, if you do decide to have a holiday in Gozo, make sure you take the open bus trip, which will show you the whole island. It starts in Victoria and goes around the island, which is very small, and you'll do it in a couple of hours. Probably need to hire a car, but there's no traffic lights when I went there. There's a few traffic lights now, and the roads have been definitely upgraded, and this is something to do with the European Union have pumped in a lot of money there. But you can drive with an open-topped car. There's very little traffic unless you go into Victoria, and for the rest of the place, it's just so relaxed. So that was it. Myself and Ciaran and Alan and Ian, I can remember when we had a great night. Each night we could go to a different small town and go to a different festa because the season was on. The churches were coming down with statues and bands and people dressing up in the costumes of their local community, portraying elements of their history. It was so wonderful. You've got all the sea, you've got all the sun, you've got the local wine and the local food, and it's good value. Has slightly crept up over the years as more people from Ireland and more people from Europe have discovered it, but I would certainly say this is a gem, the best you can find in the heart of the Mediterranean. Go to Gozo. And I just have to, as we left on our ferry, now with Alan and Ian and Ciaran and me, we were tanned, we were hardened from all our scuba diving, and we toasted with Czech beer. And I had to thank Alan for giving me a whole new experience. So thank you, dear friend. I'll never mock you again. Probably I will. But thank you for sharing the Gozo experience. And if I was you, book your flight. Most of the major airlines go there. It's only 3 hours from most of Central Europe. You're in for a treat.